Hello, good people. Welcome to video number 10. My name is Dr. Neil Klein. If I want to be official, please call me Neil, as all my friends and all the students I know call me that. This is our 10th video, and I'm, as always, very excited to be doing this one. This one is called Ever Wonder How to Make Sense of Your Mind Chatter, also known as the numerous narratives in your mind. Let's just talk about that for a second. If you're anything like me, there are many moments every day that my mind is so full of chatter. It could either be thoughts that are just running wild, it could be feelings that I'm just stuck with or that keep varying, but nonetheless, I love when I've got moments when I'm just looking at something or having a moment in time when my brain is not on fast forward. The dilemma is, if I was born with a button to how to turn this off, or a rheostat, how to turn this or modulate this off in some way, in some degrees somehow, so that I can go from high to medium to low. I don't quite know what that is yet, but I'm beginning to understand more and more about the concepts and the techniques of how to make that happen, and that's the intention for sharing this video with each of you. So here we go. Let's do an experiential exercise first of all, very simple. Can you think of a moment in your recent past when your mind chatter was just ferocious? When there was so much stuff going on in your mind, you almost didn't know how to escape from it. I'm going to give you just 20 seconds to think about that, and if you can, go there for 10 seconds. With that experience in mind, I want to ask you to take a moment and ask yourself the following question. Do you have any idea what to do when that happens so you're not lost in that mind chatter for as long as it takes to quiet on its own? I also want to read a quote from a series I watched a long time ago called The Good Place. It went, "Do you ever know the sound a fork makes in a garbage disposal? Well, that's the sound my brain makes all of the time." If you've ever heard that sound, you know it is loud, it is ferocious, and all I want to do is turn the sound off. However, I need to do that in my mind or in the garbage disposal. Okay, with that in mind, that's where we're going today. Let's go over the next step. Externally, here's what I do if I've got a decision to make where I need other people's advice on what exactly is going on, and I want their opinions. And I'm assuming you do this as well. If I know I've been working really hard and I want to take a little longer time off than I'm sure is right, I know there are certain friends I will go to by design going, what do you think I should do? I know at other moments in time when I really need to stay focused and keep on working, I will go to other friends. Do you not all do that? If you've got a weekend off and you go, do I want to play or work more? You don't go haphazardly to individuals. You choose people in your life. I think we all do that externally for many decisions where we're asking, here's what's going on, what should I do? Take a moment and let that settle in also. That externally, that is our norm as humans, which is we have numerous people we speak to outside of ourselves, and we really are clever enough to know who to speak to at certain moments and situations in time, and who not to go to. Does that make sense as well? That which we do externally, we also need to learn to do internally, which is where the internal chattering of the mind comes from. Let's go back to the beginning of psychology, who would be Sigmund Freud. He came up with 3 different narratives, trying to give us a map of how to organize all the mind chatter, which would make it easy for us to distinguish who's talking. He began with saying, and this part I don't particularly love, but this is his theory and his thinking. He began by saying, we are all born with an id, ID he called it. And he said what the id is our internal instincts on how to stay alive. And he said that the id is literally aggressive and sexual input. Do this to stay alive, do this to stay alive. It's got to be sexual, it's got to be aggressive. That he called the id. Then he found as young children, we had a hard time doing that because as a young 2 or 4-year-old, if we thought that biting little Susie was a good thing to do and it felt good to us, Mama bear or Papa bear or some parental unit would go, what are you doing? Stop that right now. So we had to learn, here's my internal id, and there are some moments in time I can just do it, and there are other moments in time I need to be careful about the context and what I'm doing. Another example is young kids eat poop a lot. Mama bear, Papa bear, parental units like, what are you doing? Look at the mess you're making. From a young child's perspective, much like dogs, that probably doesn't taste as bad as grown-ups make it into, although I don't ever do it as a grown-up. However, once again, a young child needs to learn how to realize what's the context. Can I do this and get away with it? Or do I need to somehow plan what I'm going to do? That planning narrative he called the ego. We still use the phrase ego exactly the way Freud meant it back in the day. It's the part that's going to go, I've got internal demands and needs that I want to meet right now for myself. I don't care about anybody else. That would be my id. And my ego is, let's plan this out, let's work this out. His third narrative was the superego, which is how our community, and different communities can do this differently, and the range is vast. How a community, how our family can let you know, this is our norm as a family. This is our norm as a community. This is our norm as a period in time, okay? Let me give you an example. Walt Disney did this really well back in the 1950s when one of his cartoons was, you would see Donald Duck looking at this hot little Daisy Duck crossing the street on the other side of the street. And as Donald Duck is looking and his eyes were going, wah, 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 you would see a part of him coming just to the left of him, which is almost like a ghost part with horns on top. And looking at Donald going, Donald, go do it. She's awfully cute. He's awfully cute. They're awfully cute. Go across the street and make something happen. And then as Donald was about to step off the curb into the street, there would be another ghost-like image with halo on top, always having a lower voice going, Donald, 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 don't listen to that part. That part always gets you into trouble. You know this is the wrong thing to do. And then the id, Donald, do this, it's lots of fun. And the superego, this is not the right thing to do, would have a discussion. And Donald would be in the middle, turning his head and turning his head and turning his head. Does that make sense to you? That was Walt Disney going, these are three narratives, the id, the ego, and the superego. When the two others were having a long discussion, by the time Donald said, okay, let's see what we're going to do now, Daisy Duck was long gone. Was way out of the picture, had walked out of the picture. That's our norm of three different narratives in the work of Sigmund Freud, where he named them id, ego, and superego. That's one map. Another map in the 1970s, Dr. Eric Byrne said, let's modernize these words. And he changed the id to the word child ego state. I want it, it's my need, I want it right now. He changed the superego to the parental ego state. This is the right thing to do the right thing, good job, honey. And the ego, he called that the adult ego state. Someone that's just in a sweet adult frame of mind where they're not trying to be parental. This is the right thing to do. We're proud of you. This was wrong. We're not trying to be the child. I do what I want to do. But a mature grown-up going, this is what I'm going to do. Hearing both of these narratives, this is my choice. This is what I'm going to do. Does that concept make sense? Please make a moment and see if that makes sense or not. If you have seen Inside Out or the new Pixar production Inside Out 2, that's what they are saying, and they come up with probably 5 to 8 different internal narratives. And if you have the time, please see that. It'll make this video make even more sense because you'll see how that happened. And there were probably, I'm going to guess, 20 to 30 different psychologists talking about how the mind works, how the brain works when the Pixar did that video. However, let's look at what happens now. We have the ego trying to decide how to make life easier for me, how to get my needs met. The dilemma is, from birth to 5, it's been estimated that a young child has 500,000, 1/2 a social interactions with others in his, her, or their life, which means the mind chatter is just coming from 20 people, 100 people, videos, everything we've seen and watched and heard, every facial expression we've gotten to us, parental units or friends saying this is the right thing to do. That's where our mind chatter begins, because we are not old enough with our brains to understand the concept of Which of these do I, as an adult brain, as an adult mind, want to follow, and which ones don't I want to follow? We're trying to stay alive. We're trying to survive. We're trying to belong. We're trying to do the best we can. The dilemma is, from birth to 5, we've already formed our primary narratives, and they are, the word I like the best to call, we could call them defense mechanisms, we could call them coping strategies, but the phrase I almost like better than both of those is, those are our loyal soldiers. They are there to serve us. They are there to protect us. They are there from a young time in life, trying to help us meet our needs in a context that we find ourselves doing the best we can. Again, just take a moment and let that concept be there. The dilemma is, if as a young child I've learned, and I was told this as a young child, young boys don't cry. If I was told as a young child, don't be angry, or anything that a young child can be told maybe 100,000 times or 10,000 times as one, which makes it a loud internal narrative. The dilemma is, if I'm told don't cry, and then I find myself being 20 years old, I'm still going to have that narrative going, don't cry. And at moments in time when I do cry, I'm going to be embarrassed almost that it felt like the crying of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, because that narrative has had no chance to grow up and mature with me. If I'm told don't be angry, and we all have moments in time that we are angry and we throw a temper tantrum, we are going to have, again, that narrative being loud and feeling embarrassed about, oh my God, it wasn't me being angry, it was an internal narrative, a loyal soldier, very early in life being that way. We may not have those words, but psychologically going, that's our experience. So the dilemma is, why are we looking at our internal narratives? Because we'd like to have them mature with us at whatever age we are. So when we are sad, when we are anxious, when we are lonely, when we are angry, when we are in love, we could have that be the mature level that we are at, as opposed to the narratives that formed early in life. I hope, again, that concept makes sense. Let me make this personal. When I was a young child, I was blessed with having loving parents for all the right reasons. They waited 4 years for World War II to over. Their birth before me was a stillbirth, which no one knew about ahead of time. They were so thrilled they finally had a live child, and they were of age to do that. But I have a relatively easy past growing up. I became a striver, because what I got really early in life was strive, do the best you can. It served me well as a child, served me well in elementary school. In middle school, here was the dilemma. Girls, I tried to strive, had no effect whatsoever. So I learned, given the context, I had to create a whole different narrative that wasn't my striving self, that had a different color or tone or hue to it, because otherwise just striving wouldn't serve me well. We all have those moments in life again and again and again where our loyal soldiers are just immature, or we need to add a new one given the context and the maturity and where we're living in our lives. Again, does that concept make sense? I'm going to ask you to do another brief experience. Imagine how you find yourself being. What's your norm on a feeling level, on a mood level, on a being level? When you are with your best friends, how would you think about or describe, who are you? And I know it's always different, but put them all together with your best friends. With your significant other or basic partner or lover, are you different in any way than you are with your best friends? With your parents or parental units, and that may change depending on which one you're with and when, are you different than with your lover or your best friends? At work, at school, when you're by yourself. The concept being, we all have a different front. Psychological term is persona that we put out there, going back to our ego, going, what's going to serve me best? How will I meet my needs? How will I belong? We do that naturally. The question is, do we have a map for how to do that? So instead of having all this brain chatter and going, it all seems like it's just normal brain chatter in one group, can we begin to separate and understand, where is this brain chatter, mind chatter coming from? That's where we're going to go from now. My studying came from psychosynthesis. Not that I haven't done immense amounts of training, but that's the one that I fall back on most often. Psychosynthesis talked about it being subpersonalities. That's the word they used as opposed to Mindchatter back in the day. And instead of coming up with a number, 3, 4, or 5, and there are numerous maps from different types of current psychotherapy and counseling that will come up with types of mind chatter or narratives giving 3, 4, or 5 names, distinct names, okay? What I love about psychosynthesis, they said, the human being is so powerful, you don't need to give them a cookie cutter number of narratives and name them all, which all the other types do, but you can just work with them and go, let's look at what you would call your basic narratives and make it that personal and that individual that there's no cookie cutter in there whatsoever. So that's where that's where my training comes from, and I want to talk about that in my training in psychosynthesis, and you can Google that if you want to learn more about that. They say the first step is recognition. If I've got different chatter happening inside of me, I got to begin to understand who's talking. And again, going back to the beginning of this video, externally, I would look at who's talking and know who's talking and who I wanted to have the conversation with. So the question becomes, the beginning step is, do I spend time understanding who are my internal narratives, who are my unique normal narratives that are chatting to me? Which one is my perfectionist or my critic? You can name it as you want. Which one is my child? You can name it as you want. Which one is my friend? Which one is my helper? Which one is my being alone? Which one is my rebel? Which one is my confused part? Which one is my anxious part? What I'm going to ask you to do, if you want to take this where you can, is come up with 3 to 5 your internal narratives. How do you know them? They're the ones that chat with you the most. And if you want to be bold, ask your best friends, what are your normal narratives? They know that. Your friends and lovers know that all the time. Often they deal with that all the time. If you're going to ask them that question, please listen to what they say and don't defend yourself and don't be angry at them. Just look at it as information coming from another human being. So step 1 is recognizing that. Step 2 needs to be, and it's going to take weeks or months to recognize them, if not years, but you can start and it works perfectly. Step 2 is, now that I've recognized them, which ones do I organically feel close to? Great, you'll have an easy time accepting and getting to know them. The dilemma is, which ones do I hate? Which ones do I wish died inside of me? Which ones am I terrified from? And with an experienced guide or therapist or psychologist, that's what you need to look for, someone that can do depth psychology or to an extent that understands how to work with them and how to have you begin to not just recognize who they are, but befriend. The words, they're your loyal soldiers. The reason I like that phrase the best is, all they're trying to do is serve you as a 3 to 5-year-old. Once you get over your fear of them, once you get over your anger of them and your hate of them, what you're going to discover is they're exhausted and they can't wait to have you mature them. They can't wait to have you be more present and be in charge, be the choreographer, be the artist in charge of looking at all the colors, looking at all the sounds, and deciding how do you want them to be organized and which ones do you want to call on when. I hope that makes sense. There are other steps how to begin to coordinate and harmonize them as well. But for this video, let's just go over the first 2 steps from psychosynthesis. Recognition or awareness is always step number 1. How to accept them has got to be step number 2. I don't know if I've ever worked with a client that didn't set to me with one of their large narratives, be it anger or anxiety or something like that. Can we just make them die? Can we just get rid of them? And the answer is no, you can't. Any effort you're trying to put into having them disappear is wasted effort. The question is, can I begin to know them in a way that I know what they, not only how they behave, but when I'm being bold, do I understand how they feel about life and how they feel about themselves and how they feel about me? And then on a deeper level still, what do they really need? Then as maturation happens, as the guide or as a human being doing the work, I go down to not just looking at them on a behavior level, but on a deep feeling level, and being able to meet their needs, which is what changes everything. Other videos here have talked about our physiological/biological brain and how even on that level, we have different psychological narratives. I'm not going to say what they are right now. From the first 9 videos, there are a few of them that specifically speak about that. So watch other videos if you want to. And finally, the question is always one of intention. It's always one of intention. Are you curious enough? Are you sad enough? Are you anxious enough? Are you angry enough? Are you almost without hope that you're going, I don't know what to do? And you're willing to put in the intention to go, if I can begin to understand which narratives are speaking, who's speaking, and I begin to be present over that, and I have an experienced guide or helper to work with me, or I'm going to do it on my own, however you want to do that one, 2 things happen. You begin to see that you're present in addition to your narratives, which is huge. Then who becomes a conductor? Not one of your narratives, you do. And your sense of self becomes absolutely expanded beyond what it is when you think you are 1 or 2 of your narratives only who developed earlier in life to meet certain situations. The trick is to help, and the second part is how to help them mature so that when you are having these feelings, you're not a birth to 5 or birth to 10-year-old trying to adjust this, or if you are 10, you're beginning to learn at a perfect age how to begin to be present with your narratives. That's all I'm going to be doing today. Who knows what Eric will do to make it fancy, but he'll do his magic as he does, and we'll thank him at the end of this as we always do. Just want to say this one was called Ever Wonder How to Make Sense of Your Mind Chatter, also known as the numerous narratives in your head, also known as the imaginary committee in your mind. Don't you want to spend some intentionality focusing on that and seeing what the effects can be? Be well, good people. Wish you well. Thank you once again.